In the heart of Southeast Asia, where dense jungle now reclaims crumbling stone, there once stood a civilization of breathtaking sophistication. The Khmer Empire, founded in 802 CE, when the sacred mountain of Mahendraparvata witnessed a ruler declare himself universal sovereign, would become the most advanced society the region had ever known. Picture the landscape at its zenith. A city of 1 million souls thrived where London struggled to feed 50,000. Intricate waterways networked across the landscape with engineering precision that rivaled Rome itself. Reservoirs and channels captured monsoon rains and distributed them through an agricultural system so ingenious that it sustained one of history's greatest civilizations. Then came Angkor Wat. Between 1113 and 1150 CE, King Jayavarman II commanded the construction of the largest religious monument ever built. Stone by stone, the greatest temple complex in human history rose from the earth. Carved galleries told stories of gods and kings. Intricate bas-reliefs captured the daily rhythms of an empire at its peak. Thousands of workers labored across decades to create something that would outlast empires and confound modern minds. For centuries, Angkor Wat stood as the beating heart of an empire. Yet within this story of triumph lies a deeper mystery. How did such magnificence fade? What forces transformed this thriving capital into something the jungle could swallow whole, hiding its wonders until the 19th century brought rediscovery? In the early years of the 9th century, the landscape of Southeast Asia underwent a profound transformation. The region that would become known as the Khmer Empire was not born from sudden conquest or violent upheaval, but rather from a deliberate act of spiritual declaration. On Mount Mahendraparvata, in the northwestern territories of what is now Cambodia, a man named Jayavarman stood before his assembled court and priests. The year was 802, and in that moment he pronounced himself Chakravartin, a universal ruler ordained by the heavens themselves. This was not merely a political announcement. It was a theological coronation, a ceremony that claimed divine sanction for his authority and established the philosophical foundation upon which an entire civilization would be built. Jayavarman II's path to this moment had been neither straightforward nor inevitable. Historical records and scholarly analysis suggest that his early life remained obscure, though there is considerable debate among historians regarding certain details of his background. Some evidence points to his having spent formative years away from his homeland, possibly in Java, gaining knowledge of administrative systems, religious practices, and the methods by which distant kingdoms consolidated power. When he returned to the Khmer territories, he arrived not as an obvious heir to unchallenged authority, but as a visionary with a plan to unify fragmented principalities into a cohesive state. The geographical setting of his emergence was crucial to his success. The flat plains surrounding the region near present-day Siem Reap in northwestern Cambodia offered something far more valuable than military advantage. They provided the natural foundation for agricultural abundance. The terrain, characterized by numerous rivers and lakes, possessed inherent advantages that a sophisticated ruler could transform into unprecedented prosperity. This landscape, situated within a tropical monsoon climate marked by heavy rainfall during certain seasons and distinct dry periods, created both opportunities and challenges that would shape Khmer civilization for centuries to come. The declaration on Mount Mahendraparvata represented more than personal ambition. It embodied a vision of centralized power grounded in religious legitimacy. By claiming the status of Chakravartin, Jayavarman II positioned himself not as a mere temporal ruler, but as a representative of cosmic order itself. This theological framework drew upon Hindu traditions that had long influenced Southeast Asian kingdoms, establishing the king as an intermediary between the divine and earthly realms. The ceremony's significance lay in its ability to convince both the Khmer people and neighboring kingdoms that his rule possessed supernatural sanction. In the centuries that followed Jayavarman II's founding declaration, his successors would inherit both the authority and the vision he established. The empire he initiated would slowly expand its influence across the region, developing increasingly sophisticated systems of governance, religious practice, and resource management. Yet, the true flowering of Khmer power and achievement would not reach its zenith until several generations later, when the empire's resources, knowledge, and ambitions aligned to produce monuments of extraordinary magnificence. By the 11th century, nearly 2 centuries after Jayavarman II's coronation, the Khmer Empire had matured into a major regional power. The reign of King Jayavarman II, who ascended to the throne in the early 12th century, would mark the beginning of a new era of monumental construction and artistic achievement. It was during his time that the empire's rulers possessed both the wealth and the organizational capability to undertake projects of staggering scale and complexity. Between the years 1113 and 1150, under Jayavarman II's direction, the greatest architectural achievement of the Khmer civilization took shape. This was Angkor Wat, a religious monument that would eventually become recognized as the largest of its kind in the entire world. Angkor Wat's construction represented far more than the building of a temple. It embodied the accumulated knowledge, artistic vision, and engineering prowess of Khmer civilization at its height. Covering approximately 1 square mile of carefully planned space, the monument rose from the flat Cambodian plains as a physical manifestation of religious devotion and political power. The temple's design drew upon Hindu cosmological principles, its architecture encoding sacred geometry and mythological narratives into stone and mortar. The bas-reliefs that adorned its walls depicted scenes from the great Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, transforming the temple walls into vast storyboards of religious instruction and cultural identity. Hundreds of graceful Apsara statues, representations of celestial dancers, adorned the structure, their intricate carvings demonstrating the refined artistic sensibilities of Khmer sculptors. The achievement of Angkor Wat's construction was not merely artistic or religious in nature, it represented an extraordinary feat of engineering and logistics. The movement of massive stone blocks, the precision of architectural alignment, the creation of elaborate water channels and reservoirs, all these elements required not only skilled craftsmen, but also sophisticated systems of organization and labor management. The temple stood as physical proof that the Khmer Empire possessed the resources, knowledge, and social organization necessary to transform ambitious visions into enduring reality. Yet, even as Angkor Wat rose toward completion, the broader Khmer civilization was developing systems of equal sophistication beyond the temple walls. Archaeological investigations, particularly those employing modern satellite imaging technology, have revealed the existence of elaborate water management systems throughout the Angkor region. These were not decorative features, but essential infrastructure designed to harness the region's monsoon rains and control the flow of water through the dry seasons. Reservoirs, channels, and ingenious hydraulic systems allowed the Khmer to maintain agricultural productivity even during periods when rainfall diminished. This mastery of water, its capture, storage, and distribution, transformed the flat plains into extraordinarily fertile territory capable of supporting a large and growing population. The period following Angkor Wat's completion witnessed continued development and refinement of Khmer civilization. The empire's power extended across much of Southeast Asia, and its cultural influence reached far beyond its political borders. Subsequent rulers commissioned additional temples, refined administrative systems, and expanded the reach of Khmer authority. Yet this was also an era of external pressures and internal transformations. In 1177, a significant challenge emerged when forces from the Cham kingdom attacked Angkor itself, looting the great city. This assault demonstrated that even the most impressive monuments and sophisticated civilizations remained vulnerable to the unpredictable currents of regional politics and military conflict. The trauma of the Cham invasion prompted a remarkable response. King Jayavarman I, who ascended to power in the years immediately following this assault, is remembered by historians as one of the greatest rulers in Khmer history. His reign, lasting from 1181 to 1215, represented a period of recovery, rebuilding, and cultural flowering. Jayavarman VII commissioned new temples, including the Bayon, known for its intricate carvings and distinctive architectural features. More broadly, his reign represented a period in which Khmer civilization reasserted its power and refined its achievements even after suffering significant military defeat. As the 13th century progressed, the Khmer civilization underwent a profound religious transformation. The shift from Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism, occurring in the late 13th century under King Sindravarman, marked a turning point in Khmer spiritual life. This was not a sudden conversion, but rather a gradual evolution in religious practice and emphasis. Buddhism, with its different theological frameworks and aesthetic traditions, would increasingly shape Khmer art, architecture, and daily religious observance. Yet the earlier Hindu monuments, including the magnificent Angkor Wat, would endure, standing as testimony to the civilization's earlier spiritual commitments. This was the world of the Khmer Empire in its maturity, a civilization that had grown from Jayavarman II's declaration on a mountain in 802 into a vast, sophisticated power encompassing millions of people, impressive cities, ingenious technologies, and artistic achievements of lasting significance. The foundations laid in the empire's origins would support centuries of development, even as new challenges and transformations lay ahead. The early 11th century witnessed the Khmer Empire standing at the threshold of its greatest transformation. The foundations laid by Jayavarman II and his successors had matured into a sophisticated network of agricultural prosperity and religious devotion. Yet it was during this period that the empire would undertake an ambition so vast, so architecturally unprecedented, that it would forever define not only the Khmer civilization, but the very meaning of human achievement in Southeast Asia. In the year 1113, under the reign of King Suryavarman II, construction began on what would become the largest religious monument in the world. Angkor Wat rose from the flat plains near Siam Reap, a landscape ideally suited for the agricultural innovations that had sustained Khmer prosperity. The tropical monsoon climate of the region, characterized by heavy rainfall during certain seasons and prolonged dry periods in others, had long posed challenges to the empire's farmers. Yet, rather than viewing these climatic realities as obstacles, the Khmer people had developed an extraordinary relationship with water itself, transforming their environment through engineering genius. The construction of Angkor Wat between 1113 and 1150 CE represented the culmination of centuries of hydraulic knowledge. The temple complex covered approximately 1 square mile, an area so vast that modern minds struggle to comprehend the scale of labor, organization, and vision required. Satellite imaging conducted by contemporary researchers has revealed that Angkor Wat was not merely a temple standing alone in the landscape. Rather, it existed as part of an intricate system of reservoirs, channels, and water management infrastructure that allowed the Khmer Empire to feed a population of perhaps 1 million people or more. These barre, as they were called, functioned as both storage systems and agricultural tools, capturing monsoon rains and releasing them gradually throughout the dry season to sustain rice paddies and other crops. The construction of Angkor Wat itself reveals the sophistication of Khmer engineering and artistic vision. Workers quarried massive sandstone blocks from distant sources, transported them across the landscape, and assembled them with such precision that many stones fit together without mortar. The temple's design incorporated elaborate bas-reliefs depicting scenes from the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the great Hindu epics that held profound spiritual significance for the Khmer people. Hundreds of Apsara statues, representations of celestial dancers, adorned the temple's walls and corridors. These were not crude carvings, but works of remarkable delicacy and artistry, each figure possessing individual character and grace. The religious purpose of Angkor Wat reflected the spiritual worldview of Suryavarman II and his court. The temple was dedicated to Vishnu, one of the principal deities of Hinduism, and the king himself claimed to be a manifestation of the divine on earth. This concept, inherited from earlier Southeast Asian kingdoms, positioned the monarch as a Chakravartin, a universal ruler whose spiritual power maintained cosmic order and ensured the prosperity of the realm. The construction of such a magnificent temple was not mere vanity or architectural competition. Rather, it represented the king's sacred duty to honor the gods and, through that honor, to preserve the stability and abundance that allowed his civilization to flourish. Yet even as Angkor Wat neared completion, forces were stirring that would test the empire's resilience. In the year 1177, Angkor itself fell to an invasion by the Chams, a seafaring people from what is now Vietnam. The Chams looted the great city, a shock to the Khmer sense of invulnerability and prosperity. This was not merely a military defeat, but a profound disruption of the cosmic order that the king was supposed to maintain. The recovery from this crisis would require extraordinary leadership and vision. That leadership emerged in the person of Jayavarman VII, who ruled from 1181 to 1215 C and is widely considered the greatest of all Khmer kings. Jayavarman VII inherited an empire that had been wounded by the Cham invasion, yet he possessed the vision and determination to transform that crisis into an opportunity for renewal. He launched ambitious building projects throughout the empire, constructing not only temples but also hospitals, schools, and rest houses for travelers. The most notable of these projects was the Bayon, a temple complex featuring intricate carvings and distinctive towers, crowned with enormous stone faces, each face representing the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion in Buddhist philosophy. The construction of the Bayon marked a significant turning point in Khmer religious history. During the late 13th century, under King Sindravarman, the Khmer Empire underwent a profound spiritual transformation. The ancient Hinduism that had sustained the civilization for centuries gradually gave way to Theravada Buddhism, a form of Buddhist practice that emphasized individual spiritual attainment and the teachings of the historical Buddha. This shift was not sudden or violent, but rather a gradual process of religious evolution that reflected changing spiritual sensibilities among the Khmer people. The transition from Hinduism to Buddhism represented more than a mere change in religious observance. It reflected a fundamental reorientation of how the Khmer understood their relationship to the divine and to their ruler. In Hindu cosmology, the king served as a conduit between the earthly and divine realms, a living embodiment of cosmic order. In Theravada Buddhism, spiritual authority derived less from royal position and more from individual spiritual achievement and moral conduct. This shift may have subtly altered the relationship between the monarchy and its people, even as it enriched Khmer spiritual life with new dimensions of meaning and practice. During this same period, the environmental and agricultural systems that had sustained Khmer prosperity began to show signs of stress. The sophisticated water management systems that had enabled the empire to support such a large population required constant maintenance and careful management. The barrier and channels needed regular clearing and repair. The canals that distributed water across the landscape demanded skilled engineering and oversight. Scholars studying the empire's decline have debated the precise causes of its eventual collapse, recognizing that multiple factors likely contributed to the civilization's transformation. Some evidence suggests that droughts and floods played a crucial role in weakening the empire's infrastructure. The tropical monsoon climate that had been so advantageous when carefully managed through hydraulic engineering could become catastrophic if the delicate balance was disrupted. Severe droughts could render the water management systems ineffective, leading to agricultural failure and famine. Conversely, unprecedented flooding could overwhelm the carefully constructed channels and reservoirs, destroying the very infrastructure that made large-scale agriculture possible. The geological record preserved in sediment layers and the analysis of tree rings suggest that the region experienced significant climatic variations during the later centuries of the Khmer Empire's dominance. Concurrent with these environmental pressures, political instability began to fragment the empire's unity. Warfare with neighboring kingdoms, particularly with the Siamese Ayutthaya kingdom to the west, drained resources and diverted attention from the maintenance of agricultural and hydraulic systems. Internal power struggles between different factions at court weakened central authority and made coordinated response to crises more difficult. The empire that had seemed so invulnerable in the age of Angkor Wat and Jayavarman VII found itself increasingly vulnerable to external pressures and internal divisions. The sophistication of Khmer civilization in its prime should not be underestimated. The empire had developed not only architectural and engineering capabilities but also complex administrative systems, artistic traditions, and spiritual practices of remarkable depth. The bas-reliefs at Angkor Wat and the Bayon preserve images of daily life that reveal a society with distinct social classes, specialized occupations, and elaborate ceremonial practices. Military scenes carved into stone show armed forces equipped with distinctive weapons and armor. Scenes of daily commerce and agriculture depict markets, fishing, and farming activities that sustain the population. Religious processions and royal ceremonies, carved in relief, suggest a society deeply engaged with spiritual matters and organized around hierarchical authority. Yet this very sophistication contained within it vulnerabilities. A civilization so dependent on complex water management systems was vulnerable to disruptions in those systems. A society so hierarchically organized around royal authority was vulnerable to succession disputes and civil conflict. An empire so extensive in its territorial ambitions was vulnerable to pressure from neighboring powers. The greatest achievements of the Khmer Empire, the monuments and systems that testified to its power and vision, were also the most demanding to maintain and defend. By the early 15th century, the pressures that had accumulated over generations reached a critical point in the year 1431. The Khmer Empire officially ended when Angkor fell to the Siamese Ayutthaya kingdom. This was not an instantaneous collapse, but rather the culmination of a long decline. The great city was abandoned, though not entirely forgotten. The Khmer people survived and eventually regrouped in new centers of power further south. Yet the age of Angkor had passed. The abandonment of Angkor was gradual rather than sudden. As the empire's political power waned and as maintenance of the hydraulic systems became increasingly difficult, the population of the great city dwindled. Some inhabitants migrated to other regions seeking better opportunities and more stable political conditions. Others remained, gradually watching as the jungle reclaimed the carefully ordered landscape of temples and reservoirs. The sophisticated water management systems that had required constant attention began to fail as maintenance was neglected. Channels silted up, reservoirs filled with sediment. The delicate balance between civilization and nature that the Khmer had maintained for centuries tilted inexorably back toward the wilderness. Yet, even in abandonment, Angkor retained a mysterious presence in the consciousness of the Khmer people and their neighbors. Stories and legends preserved memories of the great city's former glory. Monks occasionally visited to maintain the temples, particularly Angkor Wat, which remained an important pilgrimage site for Buddhist practitioners. The monuments stood amid the jungle, gradually being covered by vegetation and soil, yet never entirely lost to human knowledge. The artistic and architectural achievements of the Khmer people, encoded in stone and carefully preserved in the temple complexes, awaited the moment when they would be rediscovered and recognized for their extraordinary significance. The 13th century dawned upon Angkor as a moment of both transcendence and transformation. The empire that Jayavarman II had forged from scattered kingdoms in 802 CE had evolved far beyond its founder's vision. The great temples that rose from the Cambodian plains no longer spoke solely of Hindu cosmology and the divine authority of Chakravartin rulers. Instead, they bore witness to a fundamental shift in the spiritual consciousness of the Khmer people, a transition that would reshape the empire's cultural identity and ultimately influence the region for centuries to come. The reign of Jayavarman VII, who ruled during the years between 1181 and 1215 CE, represents the apex of Khmer civilization and the threshold of profound change. Scholars regard him as the greatest of all Khmer kings, a ruler whose vision extended beyond military conquest and architectural ambition to encompass the spiritual welfare of his subjects. Where his predecessors had commissioned temples as monuments to divine kingship, Jayavarman VII built hospitals, schools, and rest houses along the empire's roads. He constructed the Bayon, that extraordinary temple at Angkor's heart, whose towers bore hundreds of colossal faces gazing outward with serene expressions, faces that scholars believe represented the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the embodiment of compassion in Buddhist philosophy. This architectural choice carried profound meaning. The shift from Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism, which occurred during the late 13th century under King Jayavarman, did not arrive as a sudden rupture, but rather as a gradual transformation rooted in the spiritual consciousness of the people themselves. The water management systems that had sustained Angkor's agricultural prosperity, those magnificent barrays and intricate canal networks that satellite imaging would later reveal in breathtaking detail, continued to function regardless of religious transformation. Yet the meaning imbued in these structures evolved. Where once they had symbolized the cosmic waters surrounding Mount Meru, they now represented the Dharma, the eternal law of Buddhist teaching. The temples themselves became palimpsests of this transition. Angkor Wat, that supreme architectural achievement constructed between 1113 and 1150 CE under King Jayavarman II, had been conceived as a Hindu temple, its bas-reliefs depicting scenes from the Mahabharata and Ramayana, its towers arranged in the symbolic representation of Mount Meru. Yet, as Theravada Buddhism took root in the Khmer consciousness, these same temples were repurposed. Buddha images were installed within Hindu sanctuaries. The Apsara statues, those hundreds of angelic dancers adorning the temple walls, began to represent not just divine celestial beings, but also the heavenly realms, accessible through Buddhist practice. The stones themselves remained unchanged, yet their spiritual significance was continually reinterpreted by successive generations of worshippers. Yet, even as the empire reached its cultural zenith under Jayavarman VII, environmental pressures and external threats began to accumulate. In 1177 CE, Angkor experienced a profound shock when the Chams, a maritime power from what is now Vietnam, launched an audacious assault upon the capital itself. They looted the city and struck at the heart of Khmer power. Though Jayavarman VII would restore the empire's glory and expand its territory to its greatest extent, this invasion marked a turning point in regional politics. The Khmer Empire was no longer an unchallenged hegemon, but rather one power among many competing for dominance in Southeast Asia. The environmental challenges that scholars continued to debate proved equally consequential. Satellite imaging and archaeological analysis have revealed the extraordinary sophistication of Angkor's water management systems, vast reservoirs and canal networks that transformed the flat Cambodian plains into an agricultural powerhouse. Yet, this very sophistication contained inherent vulnerabilities. The system depended upon precise seasonal patterns of monsoon rainfall and careful maintenance of the complex infrastructure. Some scholars argue that droughts and floods, Disruptions to the tropical monsoon climate that characterizes the region placed severe stress upon these systems, degrading the agricultural surplus upon which the empire's vast urban population depended. Others emphasized the role of warfare and political instability, pointing to the succession of conflicts that marked the late 13th and 14th centuries as the true catalyst of decline. What remains certain is that the 14th and 15th centuries witnessed a gradual weakening of Khmer power. The empire that had dominated Southeast Asia for more than 6 centuries began to contract. Peripheral territories fell away. The sophisticated administrative systems that had coordinated the construction and maintenance of Angkor's temples and waterworks gradually deteriorated. The population that had once numbered in the hundreds of thousands began to disperse, seeking refuge in smaller, more defensible settlements or relocating to territories beyond the reach of invading armies. The final chapter arrived in 1431 CE, when the Siamese kingdom of Ayutthaya conquered Angkor, and the Khmer capital finally fell. This date marks the official end of the Khmer Empire as a political entity, though the cultural identity of the Khmer people endured and continues to flourish in modern Cambodia. The great temples were abandoned to the jungle. The sophisticated water management systems that had sustained the empire's agricultural prosperity fell into disrepair. The barays silted up. The canals became choked with vegetation. Within a few generations, the jungle reclaimed the stones, and Angkor became a place of legend and mystery, remembered in fragmentary chronicles and half-forgotten histories. For 4 centuries, Angkor lay hidden beneath dense tropical forest. The outside world knew only scattered references to a great civilization that had flourished and vanished. European geographers puzzled over vague accounts from medieval travelers. The temples remained, their stones slowly being consumed by tree roots and weathered by monsoon rains, their magnificent carvings gradually obscured by moss and lichen. The Apsara dancers froze in their eternal dance, visible only to the occasional hunter or monk who ventured into the remote wilderness. The rediscovery of Angkor in the 19th century arrived not through systematic archaeological investigation, but through the wanderings of a French naturalist named Henri Mouhot. In the mid-1800s, Mouhot encountered the temples while traveling through Cambodia and recognized in their grandeur the remnants of a civilization of extraordinary achievement. His accounts, published in European journals and newspapers, sparked a fascination with Angkor that has never diminished. The temples that had been consumed by jungle became symbols of a lost world, monuments to human ambition and ingenuity now reclaimed by nature. The French colonial administration that subsequently controlled Cambodia undertook systematic exploration and restoration of Angkor's temples. The École Française d'Extrême-Orient, the French school of the Far East, established a permanent presence at Angkor and began the long work of clearing vegetation, stabilizing structures, and documenting the site's architectural achievements. This work continues to the present day, carried out by international teams of archaeologists, conservators, and scholars who employ increasingly sophisticated methods to understand the empire's history. Modern archaeological and technological advances have transformed our understanding of Angkor. Satellite imaging has revealed the true extent of the Khmer Empire's infrastructure, not merely the temples and palaces that survive in stone, but also the vast networks of water management systems, the residential areas where common people lived, the roads that connected distant settlements. These invisible cities, preserved in soil composition and subtle variations in vegetation patterns, demonstrate that Angkor was far more extensive and sophisticated than the surviving monuments alone suggest. The empire that once flourished across the Cambodian plains was indeed a civilization of breathtaking complexity. The environmental factors that contributed to Angkor's decline have become increasingly clear through paleoclimate studies and hydrological analysis. The sophisticated water management systems, while demonstrating extraordinary engineering skill, ultimately proved vulnerable to the very climate patterns they were designed to manage. Periods of severe drought could reduce water availability in the barays, threatening agricultural production. Conversely, unusually heavy monsoon rains could overwhelm the canal systems, causing flooding and erosion. The delicate balance required to maintain such a system demanded constant attention and investment. As political instability increased and resources became scarce, this maintenance became impossible to sustain. The shift from Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism, rather than weakening the empire as some early scholars theorized, appears to have been a gradual process rooted in the spiritual aspirations of the population itself. Buddhist teachings, with their emphasis on individual merit and enlightenment rather than the hierarchical cosmic order represented by Hindu cosmology, may have reflected changing social consciousness. The temples themselves served both religions, their sacred geometry and artistic achievements transcending particular theological frameworks. The transition from one faith to another, proceeded not through violent rupture but through slow cultural evolution, much as the stones of Angkor themselves gradually shifted and settled beneath the weight of centuries. The legacy of the Khmer Empire extends far beyond the magnificent temples that survive today. The agricultural innovations that sustained Angkor's population, the sophisticated understanding of hydrology and monsoon patterns, the engineering techniques that created the barrages and canal systems represent achievements in sustainable resource management that merit serious study. The artistic traditions that produced the Apsara sculptures and the intricate bas-reliefs depicting scenes from Hindu epics established aesthetic standards that influenced the entire region. The architectural innovations visible in Angkor Wat, with its precise geometric proportions and its integration of religious symbolism into structural design, demonstrate mathematical and engineering knowledge of a high order. The cultural achievements of the Khmer Empire also encompassed literature, music, and philosophical thought. Though these survive only in fragmentary form, Sanskrit inscriptions on temple walls preserve royal proclamations and religious dedications. Chronicles compiled in later centuries preserve memories of great kings and significant events. The oral traditions of the Khmer people, transmitted across generations, despite the empire's fall and the upheaval of subsequent centuries, maintained connection to the civilization's spiritual and cultural heritage. When Theravada Buddhism became the dominant faith, Buddhist monasteries became repositories of learning and culture, preserving whatever could be saved from the empire's intellectual traditions. The location of Angkor, near Siem Reap in northwestern Cambodia, positioned at 13 degrees 4 minutes and 12 seconds north latitude and 103 degrees 51 minutes and 51 seconds east longitude, placed the capital at the heart of a region of extraordinary natural resources. The flat plains with their numerous rivers and lakes provided ideal conditions for agriculture. The tropical monsoon climate, with its pattern of heavy rainfall during certain seasons and drier periods at other times, created rhythms that shaped every aspect of life. The Khmer people had learned to work with these natural patterns, creating systems that transformed the landscape into one of the most productive agricultural regions in the pre-modern world. Today, Angkor stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most visited archaeological complexes in the world. The temples that rise from the Cambodian plains continue to inspire wonder and scholarly inquiry. Angkor Wat Yorkt, covering an area of approximately 1 square mile, remains the largest religious monument in the world. The Bayon, with its towers bearing those enigmatic colossal faces, continues to captivate visitors with its artistic sophistication. The intricate water management systems that satellite imaging has revealed continue to demonstrate the engineering prowess of a civilization that flourished more than 8 centuries ago. The story of the Khmer Empire thus concludes not with extinction, but with transformation and endurance. The political structure that Jayavarman II established in 802 CE through his sacred ceremony on Mount Mahendra Parvata ultimately collapsed in 1431 CE when the Siamese conquered Angkor. The temples were abandoned, the water systems fell into disrepair, and the great city was consumed by jungle. Yet the cultural identity of the Khmer people persisted. The spiritual traditions, the artistic achievements, the engineering knowledge, these survived the empire's political collapse and influenced the region for centuries to come. The rediscovery of Angkor by Henry Mouhot in the mid-1800s reconnected the modern world with this extraordinary civilization. The ongoing excavations and restorations carried out by international teams of scholars and conservators continue to reveal new insights into the empire's history and achievements. Each fragment of pottery, each carved stone, each subtle variation in soil composition tells part of the larger story of a people who built one of the world's great civilizations and left behind monuments that continue to inspire awe and contemplation. The Khmer Empire reminds us that civilizations, no matter how great, are subject to the forces of history. Environmental pressures, political conflict, and social change all contributed to its decline. Yet the monuments they left behind, those temples rising from the Cambodian plains, those intricate carvings depicting scenes of divine and human drama, those vast water management systems that demonstrate environmental understanding of remarkable sophistication, testify to achievements that transcend the particular moment of their creation. The legacy of Angkor endures not merely as archaeological artifact, but as living inspiration, a testament to human creativity and ambition, a reminder of the possibilities inherent in civilized society at its finest, and a profound meditation upon the impermanence of all earthly things.